A very warm welcome to everyone. This panel that we will be covering right now is the panel dedicated to one of the, in my opinion, important topics that the Slovenian presidency will have to cover during this semester in charge, which is the issue of digitalization. But not only we will focus on the issue of digitalization, we will try to advance this topic into adding this nuance of security, because as we have seen during the pandemic, digitalization is also something that needs to be seen under the lens of security. We have seen cyber attacks attacking critical infrastructure. We have seen cyber attacks attacking, for example, hospitals. We have seen cyber attacks hijacking companies, and all these things are about to get like bigger and bigger because of the issue of the digital transformation and a further expansion of what we call the digital realm into the offline world. So for that, I would like to start making a tiny remark, and that is like almost a quote from an Italian philosopher called Luciano Floridi, and he says that we cannot anymore say that we live in an offline world, but we cannot also see that we live in an online world. We're living in somehow a hybrid of both, and we're living in an on-life world. So with that in mind, I would like to welcome our speakers today. We have Alejandro Cainzos is member of the cabinet of Margrethe Vestager, Executive Vice President of the European Commission for Europe Fit for Digital Age. So welcome, Alejandro. I would also like to invite into the stage Professor Vladlena Benson. She's Professor of Cybersecurity Management at Aston University. And last but not least, Mr. Uroš Svete. He is Director of Information Security Administration of the Republic of Slovenia. So welcome, Uroš. And since this topic is very, very broad, and I think we all have complementary views on the issue, and since the focus of our conversation is to provide a thorough understanding of the issue of digitalization and security in the upcoming Slovenian presidency, I would like to start by asking you which, under your opinion, are the most important issues related to the digital agenda in Europe, and what are the challenges that the Slovenian presidency is going to face? So if I may, Cainzos.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm very happy, very grateful for the invitation. It is busy times now, as I guess we are all trying to keep the illusion alive that we will clean our desks before the summer, and I know it will be also very busy for our colleagues who are preparing the start of the Slovenian presidency. So it is, in a way, great timing to do this event, and it is also a great timing for the Slovenian presidency itself. If you look at the 5-year mandate cycle that we have. Because looking at our digital agenda, it seems clear that now we are hitting that point of the curve where we move from a conceptual phase into a delivery phase, where the Commission has been busy doing its homework, proposing strategies, proposing legislation, and now it's the time for the Council and for the Parliament to make them real. So as you know, at the beginning of this mandate, our President Ursula von der Leyen made the twin transition the priority for this Commission, the Green Deal and the digital transition. And they're really twin because you cannot have a Green Deal without digital tools, and you cannot digitize without sustainability. So for us, they are absolutely linked. But while the goal for the green transition was clear, we want to be the first carbon neutral continent by 2050, we didn't have such a clear goal when it came to digital. So this is one of the things we've been working on in this conceptual phase, which is to really define those goals, define where we want to be as a continent, as societies and as economies as we digitalize. And now we have them. We have a digital compass by 2030, which was proposed by the Commission, agreed by the European Council, and which sets the clear targets of where we want to be. And we set this out along 4 cardinal points. First, digital skills, and education. Second, infrastructure. Third, digitalization of businesses. And fourth, digitalization of public administration. So we know where we want to get. Basically we have two strands to work on this, which will be both, I think, very important as the Slovenian presidency kicks off. The first one is the investment side and our ability to boost our digital capacities, and the second one is the regulatory side and our ability to create fairness and trust in the digital economy. So looking at investment, maybe just to quickly highlight some points. It is now when we will finally get the new programs of the EU multi-annual financial framework going. We're now programming the whole EU budget for the next 7 years, and it will be during the Slovenian presidency that most of these programs will kick off. And in particular, I would highlight the Digital Europe program, which is what will allow us to invest together in really this high impact capacities such as high performance computing, artificial intelligence, etc., where we need to create that critical mass and those economies of scale, and the Connecting Europe facility, which will allow us to create the digital infrastructure that we're talking about. And all of that will be coupled with the massive investments that we will inject through the Recovery and Resilience Facility. As you know, the Commission is right now approving the first plans, national plans. The requirement for them is to have at least 20% of spending on digital. We know some of the countries whose plans have been already approved go higher. While hopefully a few of them might still slip through in the Portuguese presidency, I think the majority of these plans will be assessed and decided upon under the Slovenian presidency. So I think a lot of work to get all this investment going with strategic direction and in amounts that will be an opportunity we've never had before in Europe. And the second bit, obviously, is regulation. We have a very ambitious package on the table. Some of them are only recent, so one cannot be over demanding with a presidency. But I think there is certainly a huge opportunity to advance the digital agenda, if not to close some files, at least to have so-called general approaches where the Council will take a position. We're obviously thinking about the Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act. You mentioned cybersecurity. We have the Networks and Information Systems Directive, which is being reviewed. And I think if there is one maybe low-hanging fruit, ideally could be close under the Slovenian presidency, that could be the Data Governance Act, because this is the act that will set the overall, let's say, framework for how we share data in Europe, such as public data, for example. So it would be very important to have that framework in place before we dive into the more specific rules that would govern things like sectorial data spaces, for example. So I don't want to be too long. I'll stop here, and I hope the list of priorities is not too long, but there is certainly a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Alejandro. I think that one of the things that you have said that I think is the key of this presidency is the fact that, as you have said, the conceptual phase is over. We're moving on to the implementation phase. And there are so many files on the table that need the attention of the presidency. You have mentioned a few, but indeed, all of them, we can just like cluster them into cybersecurity, into this recovery and digitalization. And we can also like speak of the Artificial Intelligence Act, which has just been proposed in a sense. So with that, I would like to ask Mr. Svete to come to the table and to give his initial remarks.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Perfectly, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. Of course, at the very beginning, I would like to thank to the organizers, University of Ljubljana, Faculty of Social Sciences, and the Trans-European Policy Studies Association for organizing this pre-presidency conference. It's really important that we can share the priorities and, of course, the tasks we will be able to mitigate in the next semester regarding digitalization and security. Absolutely, you are right that the digitalization and cybersecurity are two coins of the same story, and we cannot separate these two issues anymore. That's nothing new, but on the other hand, pandemic and the latest social development just confirmed the thesis that digitalization is already touching every corner of our lives and growing exponentially every year. So this is not, I would say, just technological progress, but it is, of course, social progress as well. And I deeply agree with you and your citation that now we are living actually some kind of hybrid world, a mixture of a physical and virtual one. But on the other hand, we have to be aware that technology is per se not good or not bad. It's not developed to be of course, just of some beneficial for us, but we have to have in mind that the number of incidents, the number of let's say misusage of the digital technology is really increasing in the last years, not just in the European Union, but I would say worldwide. So the costs for the companies for cybersecurity incident mitigation, the number, as I mentioned, then the infrastructure which was under attack is definitely something what is really increasing from the year to year. And we, of course, have to have in mind that cybercrime is today probably one of the most profitable crime arts or crime ways in the world. So it is probably, unfortunately, one of the biggest and added of and the most added value, I would say, crime in Slovenia, in Europe, and in general worldwide. So this is something what we have been witnessing in the last decade, in the last years. And what is maybe new and what I want to expose as well is that even the infrastructure per se, so the hardware, software services, which should be kind of guarantee for the secure and stable cyber world, are not, of course, 100% secure and safe. And just two of the affairs I can expose: SolarWinds or Microsoft Exchange Server Zero. The exploit confirmed the thesis that there is no, of course, island. There is no isolated company which would not be affected by the vulnerabilities or by the incidents. And in the last, let's say, weeks and months, we in the European Union, of course, have been seeing malicious cyber activities significantly disrupt energy supply or critical health service, healthcare service, like in Ireland. Or we, of course, have been witnessing the attempts to undermine democratic processes, elections, etc. So this is something what is, let's say, the state of the art in the digitalization from the cybersecurity perspective. And on the other hand, cyber threats are becoming more complex. are growing in terms of scope, frequency, and sophistication, and what is maybe new, that they are getting more and more concrete physical damage impact. So the cyber threats are not just are not actually kept isolated inside a virtual space or cyberspace, but are of course really influencing and impacting the physical world. So this is something what definitely European Union has to address, has to mitigate, and has to I would say incorporate into our further development. Therefore, we decided to expose as one of our priorities for the upcoming presidency of the EU, so that we really want to try to make more concrete actions in the field of cyber security, but not just on this, let's say, concept level, but we are really trying to push forward concrete operational tools, information exchange, policies, and regulation, which is, of course, important for getting an increased level of cybersecurity. Maybe I can a little bit later go more into the details what we are trying to expose in the area, let's say, of NIS directive or revision of NIS directive. What is the what are actually what is our ambition to how to make efficient, let's say, joint cyber unit, or let's say implementation, and how we are trying to make really concrete in the field of cyber diplomacy toolbox, etc. So there is a lot of really concrete initiatives, and I'm glad that the European Union is not just trying to put this agenda in a way like that cybersecurity is kind of a buzzword. I think that this is something what we actually are proud of them, that cybersecurity is, from our perspective, imminent part of digitalization and imminent part of our everyday life. And that's something what, let's say, 10 or 15 years before was not so easy to be achieved.
Very interesting comments. I think that the last definition of cyber as an imminent part of digitalization is something that seems so obvious, but at the same time needs to be reminded all the time. So I'm going to stick to that and to Professor who's
yes, I think Andrea froze for a second. Andrea, are you back with us? Yes.
I'm back. Yes, I was inviting Professor Benson for her.
Okay, Andrea, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this amazing panel. And perhaps from my perspective of where the last year has changed us and how the conversation around cybersecurity and ethics of emerging technologies have progressed is probably most prominent in the context of the digitalization and digital transformation that many organizations have undergone. Now, the point that I wanted to make is around what we call the testing times for privacy in the aftermath of COVID, as you have seen, have known, have experienced yourselves. So we have, as such, undergone a demise, or have seen, have witnessed a demise of data sovereignty. The privacy, the individual data ownership have been almost decimated for the purpose of the greater good, if you think about it. And the pandemic has undoubtedly changed the world and the digital ways in which we work and live. They will be here to stay. It is a long-term change that we have seen over the last months, years, etc. We have witnessed the fact that organizations have digitized at least 25% faster during the multiple lockdowns. Those businesses who were not born digital have been pushed into the virtual mode operandi almost overnight, if essentially it was the way to survive in the current pandemic situation. As we were and are witnessing the global digital transformation, personal data collection and processing have also scaled up to an unprecedented level. And it almost was like a blink of an eye of how much data was accumulated on each individual and businesses and so on as a result of this. So think, in the UK, we had track and trace applications, the vaccine passports, conversation, sharing of data across borders, etc. The development of the trusted framework for digital identities and sharing the information has been or is underway of rolling out in record time. So there is a question about the ethics and the, again, cybersecurity of those initiatives, and questions raised about have all the elements of the focus on an individual have been observed, how secure those programs are, how quickly they were rolled out, and what are the implications of such. However, we also have seen less visible and newly approved statutory documents, such as the coronavirus, retention of fingerprints and DNA profiles in the interest of national security, number 2. Regulations on the US Cloud Act, amendments to Singapore personal data protection, not to mention China's technology dominance. So the data sovereignty, ownership of the individual data, pretty much that was aimed at to give data owners back to individuals, look as unreal as going to a pub in a lockdown, really. The work on personal privacy modeling and privacy enhancement techniques are seemingly overshadowed by the greater good. So we have quite a few elements that we with the context of emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, the data that's being collected through the IoT devices, etc., how the data is managed, how the data is protected, and how the data is exploited in the post-COVID world. I think it's worth a discussion, and how individual data ownership has changed and has been transformed by this. There's also, there's also a silver lining to all of this, in the sense that we now understand a little bit more over the digital identities, what needs to be done in order to execute the program in a more effective and efficient way, etc. There's also a lot of work that is going at the European level from the point of view of a definition of frameworks and roadmaps to where we're going to go in the next year or so. At the end of July, we hope to deliver from ENISA side the skills framework in the cybersecurity, and a more structured way of looking at the areas of again, sort of capability in that space, and we hope to see a lot more positive developments. But again, the question around ethics, data handling, and the emerging technologies still remains.
Oh, thank you very much. I think that from the variety of opinions and expertises here on the table, we can all disguise that this issue of digital is, if ever, first of all, more important, second of all, more of relevance of today. I think that if we all make this tiny exercise of thinking of the European Union 5 years or 10 years ago, we would not be speaking about the issues of ethics, of digital sovereignty, of cybersecurity being such a key component of the European Union itself at the economy, but also security levels. So for that, I would like to start with the question, because I don't want to go that far away. And right now we have seen like very different issues being raised on the table. So I think that just dragging from this idea of ethics, indeed creating this twin transition, which is both digital and green, as Mr. Cainzos has said before, it is very important. But the European Union is trying to do something else, which is like driving this innovation from an ethical point of view, from a value-driven approach. So with that extent, I would like to raise a point for the digital services package, which is certainly one of the priorities of the Slovenian presidency. And I would like to go to you straight and ask you, Professor Benson, do you think that this ambitious package will be able to be implemented on time? Like, what do you think are the challenges now being seen in the legislative process of the digital services package?
Well, I think that this is an absolutely timely delivery, and the package as such. There are the usual, or what we probably have foreseen, in a sense that we are dealing with quite a heterogeneous collection of states, and the ways that the levels of digitizations are implemented specifically in different countries. So that creates a level of complexity. The part that I touched in my introduction is the lack of skills. There is plenty of opportunities to invest. There's plenty of opportunities to execute new programs of innovation, etc. But the sustained talent of pipeline that would support sustainable execution of the objectives of the program, I think that remains an issue. And this is, again, with my hat of a task force member on the development of the skills framework, we have identified that there is a massive gap in the EU skills market across all the digital profiles and across all of different digital sectors.
Well, in fact, that is one of the many issues that the Digital Compass tried to cover. By 2030. The European Union should have, let's say, more people in the IT sector ready to take on the labor market. But just trying to come with this Digital Services Act and Digital Services Digital Markets Act, it is true that we are also let's try to see all these files in the context, which is a context in which after 4 years of the Trump presidency, we have seen Europe re-emerge, let's say, in the digital field as more of a powerful actor. So right now we have seen there has been the G7, there has been all these meetings occurring during the last week. So I would like to broadly ask you about this notion of digital sovereignty and strategic autonomy of Europe. And I think that for example, you, Mr. Cainzos, would be this suitable person to respond to this question. What is the role of this package exactly on this notion of digital sovereignty, and how does that affect the transatlantic relationship?
Well, it's a good question. I think at the core, the goal of the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act is to make sure that the key decisions that will shape our digital economy are taken within our European democracies. We've seen that both when it comes to deciding what is acceptable to have online as opposed to offline, or when it comes to allowing access to specific markets, certain gatekeepers have acquired a power which has never been seen before, and which puts into question who at the end of the day makes these key decisions. Is it someone which has the legitimacy that comes from having been elected? And I think in that respect, with what we try to do with the DSA in terms of content moderation, making sure that what's illegal online, it's also illegal offline, that decisions that are taken in social media platforms, for example, have redress, that people can ask and exercise their rights. What we try to do in the DMA to make sure that markets are open and contestable. All of that is really at the core of our values as democracies. So the link you make to the summit we had earlier this week is quite a pertinent one, because at the end of the day, what we see is the emergence of rival systems of digital governance, where the question is, should the state decide every aspect of citizens' lives, as we see in certain autocracies? Should we let everything to be decided by a few corporate boardrooms, or should we find a way to empower citizens to take those decisions? And as Professor Benson said, to really be owners and decide upon their own data. And I think this came out quite strongly in those summits, that there is a certain convergence between democracies, and in particular at the EU-US summit, between the EU and the United States, that we do share certain values, and therefore we should try to converge when it comes to all these rules of the road for the digital economy. And this is why on Tuesday we announced the creation of an EU-US Trade and Technology Council, whose goal would be precisely to set such rules of the game and to promote the innovation and competitiveness of the transatlantic economy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cainzos. I think that indeed the context of these talk that we're having today makes your point even more relevant. And I think that after all, what we are trying to say is that data matters and data security matters. And as Mr. Svete has said before, we are seeing cyber threats becoming the new normal. And indeed, many reports agree that the last year was the year in which companies received the most cyber attacks, partly because of the exposure range of their clients, since many companies took their workers home for safety reasons, of course, and everyone was more connected than ever. So with that in mind, I would like to shift to another priority of the Slovenian presidency, which is indeed cybersecurity. So I wanted to ask Mr. Svete, what are the main challenges that you foresee to ensure cyber resilience in the Union based on your experience?
Well, the main challenges we for sure we will actually face in the next not just semester but in the next years are definitely I would say connected with the reflection cyberspace and digital technology has in our everydays and our business life. I mean, this is something what we have on the table, and now this seems to be like a priority, but actually this should be practically everyday's business or everyday's agenda. Before I would expose some concrete challenges from our perspective. Maybe if you allow me, I would like to react on the question by the Jim Close in the chat room, because Jim very interesting, asked very interesting question, and this is if there is not a risk that in Europe we are so obsessed with protection and security and ethics that we actually forget to develop industry technology. I mean, I would not say that, or I would not agree that we are obsessed with security and protection and bureaucratic obstacles, but this is maybe something what is a way out for Europe, for the European Union, regarding North America or Eastern China. So this is absolutely fact that in the area of semiconductor production, in the area of services, cloud, operational systems, and gadget production, that we are behind. That's nothing new. But the problem is that let's say cybersecurity was not integrated in the technology in a way as we want to see in the next future. So our way is that cybersecurity should be integrated by design in the new products. That means that we cannot just leave the cybersecurity to be responsibility or just a task for IT industry. Nevertheless, if we are talking about software, cloud services, or hardware, because we have actually been challenged in the last years that the best or the biggest, the most influential IT business is not actually is still not on the level regarding cybersecurity as it should be. So the market obviously has not been able to fulfill this most important task. And therefore, I think it's important for European perspective that we would integrate cybersecurity into the new technologies like AI or quantum or cloud or whatever. So that means that from this perspective, European Union should then offer a third way how to develop technology vis-a-vis, let's say, very liberal and free development in North America, or very state-centered way like they have in Asia or China. So this is something maybe what we have been facing as well, and this is a very important challenge because we discuss a lot about sovereignty, about new, let's say, push how to digitalize our societies, but in fact we still have a real challenge how to make our countries and the European Union more competitive vis-a-vis, let's say, the most influential and most powerful stakeholders worldwide. The next challenge I have to mention is that European Union, we have very big discrepancy, if I may say so, between particular member states, and on one hand, and on the other, that cybersecurity is right now covering from so many perspectives inside every single country as well. That means that cybersecurity is actually, or can be perceived as a very important added value for the business, for the economy, for the industry. On the other hand, cybersecurity is today's everyday business for law enforcement or intelligence, or even somewhere for the military. And that means that every single technologically based incident can be perceived from so various perspectives and of course very different tools. And this is what we actually are calling the state of complexity. Complexity means that we have a lot of stakeholders, that we have problems and challenges how to exchange information and data inside the country or between our member states. And this is definitely one of the biggest challenges for not just for Slovenian presidency, but for the entire development, how European Union would then provide concrete, efficient cybersecurity ecosystem where we would, of course, enable the exchange or cooperation between business, between individuals, between let's say state authorities, and this is something what is for cyber so important, because there is no doubt that without this support we would never get a additional or a sufficient level of cybersecurity. And this is not just for European Union right way. If you have been watching the Senate hearing in the USA about particular scandals like SolarWinds or some others, there is no doubt that even in the USA, with so tremendous and so, I would say, developed ecosystem at the state level, they really need to be then engaged and supported by the business and by the IT companies. And this is the same for the Europe. So we would have to think about how to overcome this bureaucratic sometimes obstacles, and how to reach enough trust and beliefs to exchange very sensible information about IT infrastructure, about the incidents, because you know that incidents are, from the business perspective, not to be declared because they can impact their competitiveness and business position or market position. But from the state perspective, for us, it's very important to get an overview. So what is, or where is the scope, and what is the target? Where are the targets? And this is very important for crisis management, for big crises as well. So if we are trying to really react very quickly and very efficiently, then we have to have in mind the mapping, the infrastructure, the stakeholders, and this is something what is very big challenge for us at the state or European level, for sure.
So thank you very much, Mr. Svete. Maybe I would like to continue with what Jean Claus, which is the participant who has launched that question that Mr. Uroš Svete has responded. He said, because I would like to read the whole question, that is there not a risk that in Europe we are so obsessed with protection of security and ethics that we forget to actually develop a vibrant industry? Into that, another participant has said, there's a good point, and it has also something to do with the notion of European strategic autonomy, because in fact, and she points out, her name is Susan Heinecke, is that industry and protection could go hand in hand. So with that, and without losing that idea of being discussing the issue of cybersecurity, I would like to open the floor for anyone, although I think that maybe Professor Benson would like to take on this. How do you think that the new, let's say, industrial approach of the European Union can help, on the one hand, advance this new industrialization of the European continent, while in the other hand protecting the notion of strategic autonomy and enhancing cybersecurity without losing that idea, which is values and which is ethics?
Andrea, I'm very glad that you have highlighted this perhaps conflicting views between seeing the innovation and advances in technology as a counter, perhaps effective in the sense of ethics. I think that the European Union, and this is where a pivotal role of the next presidency perhaps stands, it prides itself for observing the values, the ethics of the emerging technologies. And I think that we cannot forego those values in relation to perhaps faster adoption of technologies, or giving up the priority of protecting the citizens within the European Union to, or perhaps observing the cybersecurity objectives to a lesser degree because of the efficiency and various other elements that we see elsewhere, such as in the economies mentioned by Mr. Svete earlier. But one of the areas that Uroš have touched, and I actually think that this is a very interesting and an area that will develop and will be addressed in the next few years, and certainly the Cybersecurity Innovation Research Center is working a lot with the industry and the regulatory bodies in the sense of the security by design. keeping the idea of development of devices, of technologies, of solutions, with the security being an important and a focal point from the start. What we have seen in the past, and particularly through the pandemic, that was highlighted as a challenge, is the fact that cybersecurity in products that we consume, that we use, that we advance our competitive position and so on with, come with cybersecurity as being the afterthought. It's the add-on budget. It's the complexity that is unknown or ill understood by the perhaps the C-level management, and it's not necessarily on the agenda of every company as such. I think that the pandemic has highlighted the speed with which we are innovating, but also brought the cybersecurity on the agenda of accountability at the highest level in many, many firms. And we now understand how important this is, and perhaps this is where going back to the roots of the security by design concept and the approaches that have been taken across the European space would be lessons learned and integrated from the ground up in the nearest future. One of those initiatives that we work with is security by design in terms of the hardware. We often overlook security of devices, and from the hardware perspective, and there's some innovations that went into that space from my experience. But overall, we also have to understand that as European space have digitized and have accelerated a digital transformation, on the opposite end of this, we have OCGs, the organized criminal groups, the cyber criminal communities, who have in fact digitized just as fast. So, if we had the arms race in the past, where we perhaps have not been cognizant of cybercrime as a service, commercial availability of various adversarial tools, and going to the next level of exploiting this digitization space from the perspective of cyber criminals, we now are well aware that the composition of the adversaries have grown, their capability have increased immensely, and again, there's interest from the adversarial states as much as the very low level opportunistic cyber criminals as such. So I think that the next phase for the European presidency, and obviously for Slovenia, is the fact that you are faced with more better equipped cyber criminals, that the cyber attacks will continue. They will become more and more sophisticated. Most of them will probably still center around the support that adversarial states, again, going back to the ethics question and the values of how we develop and achieve the objectives of the digitization for Europe observed. It is something that will present a challenge for the nearest future.
Indeed, and I can see how cyber is taking the center stage in this debate. Certainly, as we have all seen from the beginning, this is like something that must be paired up with the issue of digitalization. But I don't want to lose focus on what is happening in the chat, because we have a vibrant conversation happening over there to what Mr. Uroš Svete has responded to Jim Claus in the issue of mobile phones, that in fact Europe was the biggest user of mobile phones, but we lost the battle when mobile phones became high-performing computers, where a crucial part is the operating system and software and hardware, when we are not champions. Indeed, I think that this is something that the Commission has noticed, and that is part right now of let's say, the strategy of the European Union. And I would like to ask you, Mr. Alejandro Cainzos, in the digital compass, there's like this part that refers exactly to semiconductors and how the industry semiconductors should be produced in Europe. But I was like thinking that maybe another challenge for the Commission, and indeed another issue to bring for the Slovenian presidency on the table, is not only focusing on semiconductors, but also on critical materials that are going to be useful in the future. I come because I think I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Andrea Rodríguez. I'm research fellow at CDOP. I'm a specialist or working on emerging and disruptive technologies. I did my thesis on quantum computing. So in that regard, for example, like not only semiconductors, but in the near future, superconductors will be like part of these like high performing computers, and they are not part of the strategy yet. So do you think that there will be a way in which we could not think these issues in advance and not wait until we see that Europe is dependent on foreign suppliers? Like how can Europe, while navigating all these issues, like try to rethink the issue of the supply chain?
Thanks. I'll try to answer that if you allowed me at the end, maybe also come back to Jim's question in the chat, because I found it a very interesting one.
We're going to continue with cybersecurity after this, so go ahead if you have
all right
on that.
No, you are absolutely right. I mean, I think it's a twofold exercise. First of all, we have to assess what our critical vulnerabilities are right now, and this is an exercise we just finished. And we do need to keep a forward-looking sense on that. In terms of the supply chain vulnerability, what we did as part of the update of the industrial strategy a couple of months ago, we analyzed thousands of different supply chains into the European Union and assessed that from all of them, I'm quoting from memory, so the numbers might not be exact, but around 130, we found that we had import dependency, and then we went into that and checked which are the ones where the private sector could themselves take care of it, either because there is sufficient supply to diversify in the market or through innovation. And so we narrowed it down to about 30 or 40 really critical supplies, for which there is no alternative and for which we are dependent, and a lot of them have to do with raw materials and rare earth, but we also found several around pharmaceuticals, for example. So it is important to have this awareness, because that then helps inform policy when it comes to investment. And on your question on critical materials and the future, what we've done is, it was announced back in February, we've created something called an Observatory of Critical Technologies, so that indeed we keep this constantly under review. It's not a one-off exercise. So every year, this observatory will produce a report where we will precisely assess where we are on supply chains, on critical vulnerabilities, and dependencies, but also where we have our strengths, because others do depend on us as well on a number of things. So definitely agree that this needs to be a future-proof exercise. Now, if I may go back to Jim's question, I may, in a way, dispute the notion that the fact that we haven't had a tech giant in Europe has to do with an obsession with protection or ethics. What we see is more a problem. I would say there are two reasons why you might say that's not true. First, if you look at how things have evolved since GDPR was adopted, if you look at it as probably the prime example of this European obsession, everyone around the world is copying it. The big companies themselves have interiorized it. They are applying it even in countries which have not regulated in a similar way. And I don't think that has been a barrier to their growth, quite the contrary. And the other counterfactual is that what we have observed, and increasingly so during the pandemic, is that the ability of people to trust technology is more and more linked to their willingness to take it up. And the clear example of this were the COVID mobile tracing apps, that everyone rushed to design them, and everyone rushed to make sure they were privacy preserving, but still many people were simply not convinced. They didn't trust them, and they did not take them up. So there is, in a way, a crucial link between protection and our ability to develop technology as well. So no, we don't want to regulate things we don't know how to do. So this is why we do need to absolutely invest more in developing our capacities. Probably the biggest problems we've seen in the past, and that's why we haven't had these giants, have to do with the constraints we have for companies to scale up in Europe. Because even though much effort has been made to develop a digital single market, the reality is that barriers still exist for companies to grow across Europe, and most importantly, to access capital, and the type of capital that comes with knowledge. So we see a lot of startups who reach a certain threshold and then will go to Silicon Valley, not just because of not because they cannot get money here, but because they want the kind of money that comes with expertise, and that you cannot find so easily in the EU. So now, as we move to the next phase of digitization, where we go from primarily consumer data into industrial data, where everything's going to digitize, from agriculture to heavy machinery and everything in between. I think we have a second opportunity to solve these problems, but also, and here I do agree with the question, to handle data better. Because yes, the Chinese and the Americans have gathered lots of data through their platforms, and in the case of China through the state. But I think in Europe there is a huge untapped potential with the amount of data we produce, and even more the amount of data we will produce, as we are a very industrial continent. So this is why it is so important, as I said at the beginning, that we get the framework for data sharing right, so that all the right incentives and protections, going back to the beginning, are there, so that people feel compelled to share the data, so that the best use can be made out of it.
Thank you. So I would like to draw on the last issue of data sharing, and I don't want to abandon the topic of cybersecurity, because I think that the participants are enjoying that. They are being really active in the chat, and I think that we have such a great panel for discussing these issues. So upon this notion of data sharing, we just coming back to previous papers, the NIS directive has proven essential in enhancing the level of cybersecurity in the Union. And one of the pillars, let's say, of the NIS directive has been exactly that: information sharing about cyber threats and this coordination to respond to them jointly. So I would like to ask you, Mr. Svete, again. So now this new paper, the NIS2 directive, is expected to arrive at the Council in late 2021, so at the end of the year. Can you tell us a little bit more about how this directive will help in increasing the Union's cybersecurity?
Yes, indeed. NIS definitely is one of the biggest achievements in the EU regarding cybersecurity. And what is for me so important is that NIS directive has been actually come from the Digital Single Market Initiative, or Digital Single Market Framework. So NIS, of course, was not, or cybersecurity based on the NIS directive was not started from national security position, what is really important for spreading the common tools and common procedures as well. So definitely, I would not, of course, with some findings, I would not go against NIS in the sense that, of course, is a tool for bringing cybersecurity in the next stage from weak or not so positive, I would say, perspective. But on the other hand, NIS is still somewhere in some countries to be implemented in a way we or practitioners would like to. Definitely, due to the fact that the digitalization is really accelerating in various sectors, revision of NIS is necessary. And on the other hand, in let's say last 3 years, we have been noticing some of obstacles or some of challenges we now are trying to overcome. I already mentioned currently large discrepancies among the member states, which results in the uneven level of cyber resilience because the implementation of the NIS one was not very common, and this is something what we should or we would try to change in the next stage. So first, for example, certain major hospitals, let's say in a particular member state, do not fall within the scope of the NIS directive. We have really big differences here among our countries, and there is of course some other question what should be addressed as well regarding interstate information sharing. So during our presidency, we expect a general approach for the NIS2 directive, so to have the final text of the directive proposal, and then the trialogue with the parliament can start. Slovenia definitely strongly supports the inclusion of additional sectors like wastewater or public administration. Public administration in Slovenia is already a part of cybersecurity, and NIS, our NIS implementation. Then we have space and providers of important services such as postal or courier or services or waste management, chemicals, food production. So we think that digitalization is practically crucial trigger for every single industry, and therefore we should expand these areas. We strongly support that all large and medium-sized enterprises in these sectors will be included, so that would not be then the decision on the country who or what kind of the companies would be operator or essential, either essential or important services. And so the way we are abolishing is the obligation of competent authorities to identify operators of essential services, and by increasing the level of harmonization of security and the reporting requirements is so important. So without reporting, without information sharing, there is no chance to operate on the national or international or EU level at all. We are aware that the adoption of this directive will entail additional costs for national competent authorities, for us, for instance, and for the companies as well. But we should think that this additional, let's say, cost would then bring additional added value for our economy as well. So if we would get a more resilient, more secure and safe cyber security ecosystem, and more safe and secure companies regarding this part of the threats, then we will get additional trust, additional investments, and safe and secure environment is crucial for further development of the economy. So this is something what should be our interest and priority for the entire society or economy. Then maybe for our audience, what is important, NIS 2 or revision of the NIS 1 also strengthens security requirements for the companies by introducing a risk management approach and a basic requirement for cybersecurity. So that means that we are not just producing directives or laws or bureaucratic procedures, but we are very concrete how to strengthen security and how to push forward our companies. And NIS 2 specifies the procedures for the reporting, as I already mentioned, and the deadlines for submitting them. This is very important because deadlines are in cyberspace crucial. If we are really not able to react, to cope with the incident very quickly in the seconds or in the minutes, then the damage is of course out of control.
And I think that with that intervention, we're going to finish the issue of cybersecurity, because there is so many other things to cover today, and I don't want to gather all the time with this topic. We have like around 20 minutes left. So I think that this is probably the time to jump into artificial intelligence, which is another of the many files that the Slovenian presidency will have on the table, and one of the priorities of the presidency and the things that it would like to advance. So I would like to go to Professor Benson and ask her that one of the things that this proposal for an AI Act does is create special obligations for companies to operate in high risk AI systems. So I think that is certainly a novelty, like something that supports this idea of a value-based technological development in the Union. And one of the, as you may know, all the audience may know, that there is like two key angles for the development of artificial intelligence in the Union. One of them is creating an ecosystem of excellence, and another one of ecosystem of trust. So I think that this proposal falls on both angles. But I would like you to tell us and to tell the public what do you think would be the challenges of the presidency in advancing this paper, because it is indeed ambitious. And do you think it may hamper the technological development in the Union, just like again, going to Mr. Claus' question of Europe being obsessed with security and ethics?
Well, there's really no point in developing unsecure technology. This technology that is not trusted or can deliver biased results or be subverted by adversaries. I mean, it's just something that has to be integral into the technological advancements that are achieved by the European space, by the European companies. So I disagree with the fact that we are so, or perhaps the European Union would be so obsessed with the ethics of developing technologies. We have been on a long journey around the AI trustworthiness, around the frameworks for AI auditing, both within the European Union. UK has gone through the same transformative regulations and guidance, etc. We're still at the stage where many companies are putting AI in a box of too complex to understand, and therefore either are slightly worried about taking this up or taking it on as an innovation, or worried about unpredictable results and perhaps problems with, again, risk management, auditing, and subversion from the adversarial actors. So it is an important area to address. And like I said, it's not the first piece of regulation or best practice or areas that have been highlighted as possibly needing more, again, investment and looking at how to make the technology more transparent, visible, more understood by the end users, and thereby enabling its adoption. Just as Alejandro mentioned, the trust into the technology is the one that drives adoption at the end of it. It also is the element that enables innovation overall, and hopefully the investment into artificial intelligence, machine learning technologies within the European space would help ourselves to lead in this space. And again, if that happens during the Slovenian presidency, that would be absolutely amazing. But yes, the questions of bias, the questions of answering the machine-enabled or machine-executed decisions, advice, and robotic process automation, and again, the possibility of compromising those processes become more and more apparent as we innovate and as we adopt technology further. So I think it's very timely to address those challenges and through new regulatory pieces, and again, drive the value-based adoption of the innovation for the foreseeable future, and again, focusing on the safe adoption of those technologies.
Indeed, and I would like to ask the same question to Mr. Cainzos, but let's focus more on the overall, let's say, route that Europe has taken, because not only we are seeing like specific regulation for the specific development of disruptive technologies such as AI, we are also seeing a specific regulation for the protection of data and for the creation of this new like industrial data, let's say, I don't want to say facilities, but I would say centers. So just to hang on one of the files that we have not touched upon, which is the Data Governance Act. The Portuguese presidency, one of the priorities for the Portuguese presidency was try to finish this paper. It has not been able. So what do you think the Slovenian presidency will be able to achieve in regards of the Data Governance Act, and how, having touched upon these three topics, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and the Data Governance Act, will help prepare Europe for that idea of preparing Europe for the digital age in which we all live right now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, absolutely, it would be, I think, crucial that the Slovenian presidency can close the Data Governance Act, because, as I said at the beginning, this is really the framework. It's the horizontal framework in which everything else will be anchored, everything else that has to do with data. And we will come with a Data Act later on, which will be much more complex with very specific rules, and then we will come with the sectorial data spaces, starting with health. So I think for all of this work to be successful and in a useful time frame, so that we, the world will not wait for us, then I think that closing that horizontal framework as fast as possible would be of the essence. When it comes to AI regulation, I think here we might need to be a bit more realistic on the ask for the presidency. It is a complex file, and of course discussion will be required. Having said that, we always get these questions about quality over speed. Well, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. So I think we can do this at a high pace, but to really get the discussion going, because there is a certain first mover advantage in this, and I think we've shown this in the past with GDPR, that kind of setting the standards in this area can be the difference between being a standard setter or a standard taker. The AI and the impact on innovation, I think we've been very conscious of that. As you said, it is a two-pronged strategy of excellence and trust. So not only we adopted regulation, there was also, but nobody talks about the coordinated action plan, but that was adopted at the same time, which is meant to coordinate the investments between the EU and the member states, so that we really try to put our money where the highest impact can be. But when it comes to the regulation, first of all, it is a risk-based approach. So we're not regulating for the sake of regulating. It's really, and we're not regulating technologies. We are only regulating applications. And it's only really those applications where we see that there is a real risk for fundamental rights and for people really core rights, such as, you know, the fact that that you will not be discriminated upon when you're going through a job selection procedure. Things that are really basic of what define our societies. And in that respect, the great majority of AI applications will be completely unregulated. There will be a subset of high-risk applications where there will be a number of requirements, but this will not be forbidden. And then there will be very few, just a handful of really almost dystopian applications that would be prohibited. So these are things like social scoring or indiscriminate mass surveillance in public spaces with a very limited number of exceptions, or the use of subliminal techniques to manipulate. So this, we're talking about a very, very targeted proposal. And we've also been very conscious there to leave room for experimentation also when it comes to the regulatory side. So we propose regulatory sandboxing as an approach, for example, for SMEs who want to test the limits. So I think that the proposal really takes that into consideration, but of course it will need to be now thoroughly discussed both in the Council and in the Parliament, who has taken, as you would expect, a very strong interest in this proposal.
And now we're finally, unfortunately, running out of time. I think that the amount of files being discussed right now are so many that indeed we could keep on speaking about different topics related to digital, which used to be such a narrow field, and now, as we have seen, covers absolutely everything. So with that regard, I would like to ask the participants to write their questions should they have any more, because unfortunately we will be like finishing very, very soon. And to our speakers, I would like to ask you to give us some concluding remarks, some thoughts that this new semester does inspire you, like some recommendations that you would like to give, or some things that you would like to highlight, starting with Professor Benson, if you may.
Thank you, Andrea. Certainly a number of very interesting aspects have been brought to the table of the discussion by this panel. We talked about whether AI is pivotal and focal area for developing regulation, whether the innovation would be stopped and not necessarily stopped, but hindered by regulating it too much, or perhaps instilling some sort of an area of distrust in the technology. I think that this might be where, as technology matures, we will have more understanding of what is needed, how it is going from the sandbox, as Alejandro mentioned, to the actual mainstream enabler of the innovation in the space. But I think that we need to also reflect on the fact that we have a lot of technologies that are not safe by design. And that would be my point around, again, preservation of privacy enhancement technologies that need to be developed, and addressing the individual rights to preserve data privacy from the individuals within the European space. And I think that the regulation there is going in the right direction.
It's great to hear that we are going to finish on a positive note. That's always welcome when speaking digital, when we normally tend to go to the pessimist side. So now, Mr. Cainzos, maybe?
Well, I'm happy to jump on the optimist bandwagon to really echo that, and to say that as we said at the beginning, we're now really entering the phase of delivery. We hope we can close the soul-searching mode and the lamentation of why we we were a bit late in the first phase of digitization, but now we see that we have a window of opportunity like we've never had before. We have a plan, we have a strategy with very clear targets. We have, for once, the funding at the volume needed to achieve them, and we have a very ambitious regulatory agenda on the table that would let us lead the way in setting the rules of the game. So if we take all of that together, all the ingredients are there. Now we just need to grab this opportunity, and very much looking forward to working with the Slovenian presidency to make that happen.
And lastly, Mr. Uroš Svete, maybe you want to close with your concluding remarks.
Andrea, thank you very much. Well, of course, I agree. I agree with Alejandro, with Professor Benson, definitely. And for me is really, let's say, interesting period before. Definitely, we would have in mind that the further technology or development of the technology, I mean, not just digital, but emerging technologies in general, will have to be addressed from technical, from social, from security perspectives. And this is definitely a way where, let's say, common approach is the only appropriate way how to deal and how to cope with the next challenges. So cooperation with the business, with the industry, with the research and development, academia, producing, of course, and innovating the new services, the new technologies, thinking that, or not forgetting that security should be incorporated by design, these new products, and at the end, the trust and belief that we are all here actually to increase the general level of cybersecurity. This should be European way how to compete with other influential and powerful stakeholders worldwide.
So thank you very much to our speakers for being here today and discussing all these relevant issues that will be not only relevant for European citizens, but indeed for the upcoming Slovenian presidency, for taking the time of sharing their insights on the matters of cybersecurity, on ethics and AI, on data security, on even we have touched slightly upon industrial policy and indeed strategic autonomy. And thank you very much to all the participants who stayed with us until the end and who threw their very timely questions and that help us agitate the debate by being controversial. I think that's something that we all appreciate, being able to respond to hard questions because only this way we will be able to provide timely recommendations. And I would like also to thank the organizers, the University of Slovenia, the Slovenian Presidency, and TEPSA for organizing this event and for their success. And with that, I would like to thank everyone.